I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd fall in love with someone while lying on a stretcher, but life has a way of surprising you in the strangest moments. My name is Dylan, and this is the story of how a man I met on quite literally the worst day of my life became the person I couldn't imagine living without. It started on a Tuesday morning in September. I was 26, working as a graphic designer from my apartment in the city, and I'd been feeling off for a few days. Nothing dramatic. Just this persistent tightness in my chest that I kept dismissing as stress or maybe too much coffee. I was on a deadline for a major client presentation, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, living on energy drinks and takeout. Classic millennial burnout, right? Except it wasn't. I was at my desk, staring at my screen, when the tightness suddenly became pain. Sharp, radiating pain that shot down my left arm and made the room tilt sideways. I remember thinking, this is ridiculous. I'm too young for this to be what I think it is. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice was screaming at me to call for help. So I did. I managed to dial 911 before everything got hazy. The next thing I clearly remember is a voice. Deep, calm, steady. Someone was talking to me, asking me questions, and I was trying to focus on the words instead of the pain. When I managed to open my eyes, I saw him for the first time. Dark hair, maybe early 30s, wearing a Navy paramedic uniform with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He had these incredibly focused brown eyes that were looking right at me, and even through my panic, I noticed he had the kind of face that made you feel safer just by looking at it. His name was Adrian. I know because his partner kept saying it. Adrian, get the oxygen. Adrian, his BP is elevated. Adrian, we need to move. But Adrian himself never seemed rushed. His hands were quick and efficient as he worked, but his voice stayed calm. He kept talking to me the entire time, telling me exactly what he was doing, asking me simple questions to keep me conscious. What's your name? Dylan. Good, Dylan. Where do you work? I design websites. That's great, Dylan. Stay with me. You're doing great. I found out later it wasn't a heart attack, thank God. Severe anxiety attack combined with a previously undiagnosed arrhythmia that the stress had triggered. Scary as hell, but treatable. They kept me in the hospital overnight for observation, ran a bunch of tests, gave me medication and a stern lecture about stress management and work-life balance. I was released the next afternoon with instructions to follow up with a cardiologist and maybe consider therapy. I figured that was the end of it. A frightening experience, a wake-up call about taking better care of myself, and a story I'd probably tell at parties someday. I didn't expect to ever see Adrian again. Why would I? He was a paramedic who'd responded to an emergency call. He probably helped dozens of people every week. I was just another patient. But 3 days later, there was a knock on my apartment door. I opened it, and there he was. Adrian. Out of uniform this time, wearing jeans and a grey Henley that fit him in a way that made me suddenly very aware I was in sweatpants and an old college t-shirt with a coffee stain on it. He had a paper bag in one hand and looked almost nervous, which seemed impossible for someone who'd been so confident when I'd met him. "Hey," he said. "Dylan, right? I hope this isn't weird. I just wanted to check how you're doing. We're not really supposed to do follow-up visits, but I was in the neighborhood and I thought I'd see if you're okay." I stood there like an idiot for a moment, trying to process the fact that the paramedic from my emergency was standing at my door looking nervous and somehow even more attractive than I remembered. "I'm good," I finally managed. "Better? Thanks to you." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "I brought soup," he said, lifting the bag slightly. "I figured you might not be cooking much. It's from this place a few blocks over. Nothing fancy, but it's good." That's when I invited him in, and that's when everything really started. We sat at my small kitchen table, and he pulled out containers of chicken noodle soup and fresh bread. We talked while we ate. He asked about my health. about whether I'd made the follow-up appointments, about how I was handling everything emotionally. It felt natural, easy, like talking to someone I'd known for years instead of someone I'd met while having a medical emergency. I learned he'd been a paramedic for 7 years, that he'd wanted to be a doctor, but life had taken him in a different direction, that he loved the immediacy of emergency medicine, the feeling of being able to help people in their most vulnerable moments. I told him about my work, about how I'd moved to the city 3 years ago to chase better opportunities, about how I'd been so focused on building my career that I'd forgotten to build a life. He stayed for 2 hours. When he left, he made me promise to take care of myself, and I made him promise to stop by again if he was ever in the neighborhood. I didn't think he actually would, but he did. 4 days later, another knock on my door. This time he brought coffee and pastries from a bakery. He said I had to try. We sat on my couch this time, talking about movies and music and all the normal things people talk about when they're getting to know each other. I kept waiting for him to mention it, to acknowledge that this was maybe unusual, a paramedic visiting a former patient multiple times, but he never did. And I didn't either, because I didn't want him to stop coming. It became a pattern over the next few weeks. Every few days, on his days off, Adrian would show up at my door, sometimes with food, sometimes with just himself. We'd talk for hours. He told me about growing up in a small town upstate, about coming out to his family in college, about the challenges and rewards of his job. I told him about my own coming out story, about the friends I'd made in the city, about my dreams and fears and everything in between. I started looking forward to his visits with an intensity that should have been my first clue about what was happening. I'd find myself listening for footsteps in the hallway, checking my phone hoping for a text, planning my days around the possibility that he might stop by. When he was there, sitting on my couch or across from me at the table, everything felt brighter, easier, more right than anything had felt in a long time. But I kept telling myself we were just becoming friends. Good friends. Because that's what made sense, right? He was just a kind person who'd taken an interest in checking on a former patient. The fact that I noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, or how his hands moved when he talked, or the way my heart did this weird flip thing every time he smiled at me. That was just me being grateful, appreciative. Nothing more. I was lying to myself, obviously. But I was good at it. The truth started breaking through on a Friday night, about 6 weeks after we'd met. Adrian had texted earlier, asking if I was free, and when he arrived, he had a 6-pack of beer and a pizza. We settled in to watch a movie, some action thing neither of us had seen, and ended up talking through most of it instead. We were sitting closer than usual on the couch, and I was hyper-aware of the space between us, the way his arm was resting on the back of the couch behind me. How I could feel the warmth of him even though we weren't quite touching. He was telling me about a call he'd responded to earlier that week, something funny that had happened, and I was watching his face while he talked, the animation in his expression, the passion in his voice when he talked about his work. And suddenly, without planning to, without thinking, I said, "Why do you keep coming here?" The question hung in the air between us. His smile faded, replaced by something more serious, more vulnerable. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his eyes, like he was making a decision. "Honestly," he said quietly, "because I can't seem to stay away. I know it started as just checking on you, making sure you were okay, but somewhere along the way it became the best part of my week. Coming here, talking to you, being with you." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I should have said something, but I couldn't find words. He kept going. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this. It's probably crossing about a dozen professional lines, and I told myself I was just being friendly, just making sure you were taking care of yourself. But I think we both know it's more than that. At least, it is for me." He paused, and I watched him take a breath, gathering courage. I like you, Dylan. More than I should. More than makes sense given how we met. And if I'm completely misreading this, if you want me to stop coming by, I will. But I had to tell you. I'd imagined this moment in my head 100 times over the past few weeks, usually late at night when I couldn't sleep. But I'd never let myself believe it could be real. Now it was happening, and all those carefully rehearsed responses disappeared from my mind. All I could manage was, "You're not misreading it." His expression changed, hope and relief, and something that looked like joy all mixing together. "I'm not." I shook my head. "I've been looking forward to your visit so much that I've basically stopped making other plans. I notice everything about you. The way you drink your coffee, the way you laugh, the way you always knock 3 times on my door. I've been trying to convince myself we're just friends because I didn't think you could possibly feel the same way." He smiled then, that full, transformative smile I'd come to love seeing. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and the fact that he asked, that he made it a question even after everything we'd just said, made me want him even more. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and he leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to change my mind. When his lips met mine, it was gentle at first, tentative, both of us learning the shape of this new thing between us. Then his hand came up to cup my face, and I leaned into him, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home and launching into space at the same time. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard, and he rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "Me too," I said. "I've been going crazy trying not to think about it." We talked for hours that night, but differently than before. Now we were talking about what this meant, what we wanted, whether we were really doing this. He worried about the ethics of the situation, about how we'd met, whether it was appropriate. I reminded him that I wasn't his patient anymore, that we were just 2 people who'd met in unusual circumstances and discovered we had something worth exploring. By the time he left that night, we'd agreed to try, to see where this could go. He kissed me at the door, sweet and promising, and told me he'd text me tomorrow. I floated through my apartment after he left, unable to stop smiling, unable to believe this was real. Our first official date was the following week. He took me to a small Italian restaurant in his neighborhood, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. We held hands across the table, and it felt thrilling and terrifying and absolutely right. He told me more about his life, his family, his dreams. I shared mine. We talked about what we wanted from a relationship, our fears and hopes, being honest in a way that felt mature and intentional. After dinner, we walked through the city, and he reached for my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. We ended up at this little park with a view of the skyline, sitting on a bench, his arm around my shoulders, my head resting against him. "This is perfect," I said, and I meant it. The night, the moment, him. He kissed my temple. "You're perfect," he said, and even though I knew it wasn't literally true, the way he said it made me feel like maybe I could be, at least for him. The next few months were like something out of a dream. We fell into a rhythm, learning each other's schedules, finding time to be together around his shifts. He'd come over after work, sometimes exhausted, sometimes wired from a difficult call, and I'd be there to listen, to hold him, to help him decompress. On his days off, we'd explore the city together, finding new restaurants and coffee shops, walking for hours, just talking, discovering all the little things that made each other tick. I met his co-workers at a barbecue one of them hosted, and they welcomed me warmly, teasing Adrian about finally bringing someone around. He met my friends at a birthday party, and I watched him charm everyone effortlessly, fitting into my life like he'd always been there. My best friend Rachel pulled me aside that night and said, "Don't screw this up. He's special." I knew she was right. What Adrian and I had was special. It was built on honesty and vulnerability, on having met each other at our most real. He'd seen me at my most scared and helpless, and instead of running, he'd chosen to stay, to keep coming back, to let something grow between us. We had our first fight about 3 months in, something stupid about scheduling and missed communication. I'd made plans, assuming he was working. He'd gotten the day off and wanted to surprise me, and we ended up both feeling hurt and misunderstood. But instead of letting it fester, we talked it through. We sat down and actually communicated, working through the issue until we understood each other. It was such a small thing, but it mattered. It showed me we could handle conflict, that we were both committed to making this work. The first time I told him I loved him was unexpected. We were at his place, cooking dinner together. He was chopping vegetables, telling me some story about his day, and I was watching him, thinking about how this had become my life. This man, this apartment, this easy domesticity that felt more like home than anything I'd known. The words just came out. "I love you," I said, interrupting whatever he'd been saying. He looked up from the cutting board, eyes wide, and for a second I panicked, thinking maybe it was too soon, maybe I'd miscalculated. Then he set down the knife, crossed the small kitchen in 2 steps, and kissed me hard. "I love you too," he said against my lips. "I've loved you for weeks." I was just waiting for the right moment to say it. We didn't finish cooking dinner for a while after that. We were too busy holding each other, kissing, laughing about the timing, about how we'd both been holding back the words. When we finally ate, the vegetables were slightly overcooked, but neither of us cared. Meeting his family was terrifying. They lived upstate, about 3 hours away, and Adrian had been talking about taking me to meet them for a while. His parents were older, traditional in some ways, but accepting of who he was. His sister was married with 2 kids. He wanted me to meet them, to be part of that piece of his life, and I wanted that too, but I was nervous. They loved me, or at least they were kind and welcoming and made me feel included. His mom hugged me when we arrived. His dad shook my hand firmly and told me he'd heard good things. His sister interrogated me thoroughly about my intentions while Adrian rolled his eyes. The kids, 4 and 6, decided I was their new favorite person because I played video games with them. By the end of the weekend, I felt like I'd been adopted into the family. On the drive back to the city, Adrian reached over and took my hand. "Thank you," he said, "for coming with me, for being so great with everyone. Your family is wonderful," I told him. "I can see where you get it from." He smiled. "They really liked you. My mom told me not to let you get away." "I don't plan on going anywhere," I said, and I meant it with everything in me. As we approached our 1-year anniversary, I started thinking about the future more concretely. We talked about it in abstract terms, about wanting the same things, about seeing this going somewhere long-term. But I wanted to do something to mark the occasion, something meaningful. I planned a dinner at the restaurant where we'd had our first date. I wanted to recreate that night, to come full circle. Adrian knew we were celebrating our anniversary, but he didn't know I had something planned beyond dinner. We sat at the same table if I could manage it, ate the same dishes, talked and laughed like we had that first night. But this time, there was a year of history between us, a foundation of love and trust and shared experiences. After dessert, I reached across the table and took his hand. "A year ago, I started, you told me you liked me, that you couldn't stay away, and I told you that you weren't misreading things. Best decision I ever made." He smiled, squeezing my hand. "Mine too. I want you to know," I continued, "that this year with you has been the best year of my life. You've made me happier than I knew I could be. You've taught me what it means to be truly loved, truly seen. And I want to keep doing this. I want to build a life with you." His eyes were shining. "I want that too. You know I do." "I know," I said. So I was thinking, maybe we should make it official. Move in together. Combine our lives instead of just visiting each other's apartments. His face lit up. "Are you serious? Completely serious? I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to come home to you every night. I want all of it, Adrian, with you." He stood up, pulled me to my feet, and kissed me right there in the middle of the restaurant. "Yes," he said. "Absolutely, yes." We found an apartment together 2 months later, bigger than either of our old places, in a neighborhood we both loved. Moving in together was chaotic and wonderful, combining our belongings, figuring out our rhythms, learning how to share space in this new way. There were adjustments and compromises, but mostly there was joy. I love our life together. I love the routine we've built, the way we've learned to navigate each other's schedules and moods and needs. I love coming home to him after a long day, cooking dinner together, falling asleep next to him every night. I love the quiet moments and the exciting ones, the ordinary days and the special occasions. Sometimes, when I'm lying next to him in bed, watching him sleep, I think about that Tuesday morning when my world tilted sideways and I called for help. I think about how scared I was, how uncertain. And I think about how that terrifying moment led me to this, to him, to a love I never expected to find. Adrian saved my life that day in more ways than one. He stabilized my heart in the medical sense, sure, but he also opened my heart in ways I hadn't known were possible. He kept coming back, kept showing up, kept choosing me until I had the courage to choose him back. We've been together for almost 3 years now, and I'm more in love with him than I was at the beginning. Our love has deepened, matured, become something solid and enduring. We've talked about marriage, about the future we want to build. We're not in a rush, but we're both certain about where we're headed. People sometimes ask how we met, and we've developed a shortened version of the story that gets the key points across without all the medical details. We met during an emergency, we say. He was the paramedic who responded to my call. He kept checking on me afterward, and somewhere along the way, we fell in love. But the real story is longer and more complicated and more beautiful than that. It's about connection and vulnerability, about taking chances and being brave enough to be honest about what you want. It's about finding love in unexpected places, in the spaces between crisis and recovery, in the quiet moments after the emergency has passed. It's about a man who saved me and then kept coming back, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because something in that first meeting sparked something that neither of us could ignore. And it's about me, learning to let someone in, to trust in the possibility of love, to believe I deserved something this good. I never thought I'd be grateful for a medical emergency, but in a strange way, I am. Because without it, I might never have met Adrian. I might never have known what it feels like to be loved this completely, this honestly. I might never have learned that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best things. So yes, the paramedic who saved me kept coming back on his days off. And thank God he did, because he brought with him the possibility of a love I didn't know I was looking for. He brought hope and joy and a future I'm excited to build. He brought himself, and that turned out to be everything I needed.